You want to do our interview standing up or seated? What do you think?
I think we should sit.
I think we should sit.
Yeah.
I said we had the opportunity to meet at, it was called Think Iowa then.
Can I just interrupt you and say, like, that still feels so awesome. I mean, I get to speak at a lot of places, and usually you sort of hope to earn an applause at the end, but you guys just generously kind of give it before anything, and I just want to be up here now and hang out with you the whole time. It's such a cool feeling, so thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Let's look right here for a photo. But yeah, it's been a little bit of time since Think Iowa, which is now called Big Des Moines. The people, Des Moines. And so a lot has gone on for you and your company since you first introduced to us Mailbox in October. So just give us a run of the land, man, of what's going down. Yeah. And let me say, you guys, this conversation right here isn't just Gentry and I. We'd love for you guys to get up to those microphones. You have questions for this guy, please, let's get to him.
Yeah, I think Iowa was really special for us. That was the first time we talked about Mailbox as the next project that we were working on at Orchestra ever. And it was a really fun time for me to come up and give a talk about the way that we were trying to use design as a mechanism for doing a startup, or design thinking as a way of trying to find product market fit. And we talked about at the end how we were taking everything we had learned about what was and wasn't working with our first product, which was called Orchestra To Do, and we were basically retooling to take another attempt at trying to get product market fit with a product we were calling Mailbox. So at the time, I think all we showed was a logo, and we had a website that just had a guy jumping off a cliff, because that's basically what it felt like to try and go after email. And I guess that was, what, in October or so?
Yes.
And then around December, we launched a video we'd been working on that was just like a 1-minute clip about the product, kind of as a teaser to let folks know that we were going to be launching an app in the coming weeks, we thought then.
So I think we actually have that video. If we have that, can we roll that? Nice. Yeah. I'm curious, on that applause, how many Mailbox users do we have right now here in the audience? Wow, a lot of people, including myself. I was like waiting in line. I was like number 300,422 to get it. I was really happy to get it. Let's talk about that real quick. I know we've come a long way in those 7 months, and we'll get to the acquisition and all that fun stuff. But you guys had an interesting launch. So, for example, when I heard about Mailbox and I wanted to get on it, I said, hey, cool, but you're number 300,000 in line.
Yeah.
So tell me about that decision to launch like that.
Well, that video ran, and we had set for ourselves what felt like this really bold goal of hoping that we'd get 100,000 people to watch it before we put it live in the store. We figured some subset of those would be excited to download it, and that might help drive some initial traction and maybe get us a bit more of a spike in the App Store. And that actually happened in the first 4 hours. So the way our office is set up, we kind of have the folks who are working on the video and the design and marketing stuff kind of sitting in one end of the space, and guys who are working on building out the system over on the other. And there was this moment where, as the view count started going crazy, like we were jumping up and down really excited that people were into this video, and the guys who were responsible for building the server side part of this were kind of getting white. Because this is email, right? It can't go down. It can't fail. And the way the Mailbox works is, your mail is checked from the cloud, it's reformatted to make it really fast and efficient to deliver it to your phone, to allow those snooze buttons to work, and so that we had to scale the service, and there was this realization that we weren't going to be able to get that to happen for everybody at once. We had planned on charging a couple bucks for the app, figured we'd go down to free and have a premium version over time with more of a subscription model. But we quickly realized that we weren't going to be able to handle the demand on the first day, and it felt like if we'd done all this work and then people download the app and it just crashed all the time or it didn't deliver your mail, that it would all be for naught. So we decided we needed some kind of way of putting people in line. And that's been done a lot on the web, but it's never been done well on the phone. On the web, you go to a place and you put in your email address, and maybe you're waiting for Gmail or Pinterest or Spotify or something, and that's okay. We're all used to that. We put in our email and we're contacted when the service is ready. But with apps, you download the app, you're pulling it onto your phone, you're bringing it into your world. And so it's weird not to have it work. So we had to figure out something to do, and that's what led to this reservation system. We felt like the closest thing we could get to was the take a number in the deli. You know, you're trying to get your sandwich and now serving number 31. We didn't know how long it would take to get everybody through, but we knew we could at least tell people where they were in line.
Tell me more about the idea of the reservation, because a lot of people, they are about to launch something and they see over 100,000 people were indicating that they want this and they want this now. Well, for you, was it just experience that said, you know, this is a good thing, but well, let's push pause because this could go really wrong if we should let everyone in? Was it experience? Was it advisors around you saying, hey, let's do it like this, let's roll it out slow?
You know, a lot of the things around Mailbox were a combination of, they were just following this path of one decision leading to the next. So we did the video because we wanted to tell people what we were working on. It really spread, and then we realized we couldn't let everybody on at once, so we knew we had to do something about that. We were really committed to a brand value of transparency and honesty, and we thought if we're asking people to trust us with their email, we need to be honest with them about what we know, which led us to this idea of giving people a number, basically. And I think that had all these secondary effects of creating all this weird demand, and it felt like waiting in line for a club or something, and some people loved it, and some people hated it, and some people were addicted to it. But it really wasn't born out of anything other than like just trying to solve one problem after the next after the next. We had this vision of transforming how email worked on the phone. It meant we had to make a lot of decisions about things that hadn't been really done before, and the reservation system was just kind of one of those things that trickled out based on that approach.
Right. A lot of people may look at Mailbox and being acquired by Dropbox as an overnight success. I mean, obviously it was not an overnight success. And so many people have had previously products or services or companies that didn't work. So I'm curious about your learnings from Orchestra and how that played into this. Again, so Mailbox, overnight success, but you had a lot of learnings that you were able to apply right into this.
Yeah, when I was here, or when I was in Des Moines in October, a lot of what I talked about was this belief that design or design thinking as a way of solving problems was really well suited for startups. And I think if you think about Orchestra as the first attempt to solve this problem, I mean, we started Orchestra on the realization that people were using email as like a terrible to-do list, that everybody had stuff trapped in their inbox, that everybody had this kind of like, feeling around their email, felt like they were dropping the ball, that it was really even worse when they tried to use mail on their phone because people were hacking it in different ways. And Orchestra was a first attempt to solve that by building a different collaboration channel that had the communication power of email but was more organized around productivity like a to-do list might be. The mistake we made there that we figured out later was that we had asked people to step out of their existing workflow. So even if you and I decided to send each other tasks, we'd both still get emails from the rest of the world. And so at best case, we now had 2 boxes to manage. So when we realized that wasn't working, I think a lot of startup philosophy would say you go back and you try something new. And in a sense, obviously we did, but we never let go of the why. We never let go of the problem we were trying to solve. And I think for us, having one foot firmly planted in like a space, an area where we felt like this is something that we're going to try and fix, and feeling free to iterate and explore and fail and retry on the solution, but not backing away from the same problem, allowed us to take our learnings and build on them, and also allowed us to basically apply the same passion and the same feeling that the problem was worthwhile the whole way through.
Well, talk more on the word passion. You said it first, I want to get into that, and you said the why. The why of making, I guess, email easier to view on your phone. I guess that was the problem, I guess. But can you talk about the passion behind Mailbox? For some people, it may not seem like an obvious passion. I'm determined to make Mailbox, email better on the phone.
Yeah, I think for us, the highest why is this idea that if you can build tools that take the friction out of work, that just make working together smoother and easier, you're sort of speeding up human progress, and at least in a little bit. And so the amount at which you can sort of grease the skids on human progress turns out to just be a function of how many people use your tool and how much better it is than what they were doing before. So it becomes this high-level goal of helping the whole human endeavor happen more quickly that can be trickled down into a silly idea like shaving off a bit of inefficiency around how someone checks mail on their phone. My co-founder, who was at Apple when we left, and I was at IDEO, we both were working on tools inside of our own organizations that were helping IDEO and Apple collaborate more effectively as organizations, and we felt like these were really worthwhile problems to work on, and that the phones in our pockets were opening all sorts of new opportunities for doing that in the rest of our lives. I think that's what got us to take the leap and to step out of what might otherwise been a good, safe career track and try something crazy, but it's also what allowed us to keep going when we didn't succeed over and over and over again. It felt like a worthwhile problem to keep kind of fighting for.
IDEO isn't necessarily it's a household name, but in entrepreneur circles, people know about it. Can you talk a little bit about your background as a designer and some of the principles that you learned at IDEO and their philosophies, which are really, really unique? You guys should all definitely read up about them, and how that has played into you being an entrepreneur, and specifically with the products that you create. Is there anything consistent or a Gentry Underwood theme?
Well, it's definitely not a Gentry Underwood theme, but IDEO is kind of sits at the center of this world of human-centered design or design thinking, which it actually looks a lot like lean startup in some ways. There's this attitude of prototyping a lot, iterating quickly, failing early, getting as much feedback as possible around solutions, and all that fits very nicely with startups. The other piece about human-centered design, though, is that the process begins by really digging deep to understand the problem you're trying to solve. So using techniques of what's called human factors research or ethnographic research or user studies, or even just getting very detailed about a problem that's bothering you, you basically try and build a comprehensive understanding about what's wrong, what's the need you're going to fix. And you want to express that need in a series of like very clear design principles, very clear expressions of what good would look like. And those become like firm stakes in the ground. You hold on to those things. And then all the prototyping and iterating and exploring and trying and failing and brainstorming and everything that comes after, it's all kind of on the solution side of that. You're looking for ways to satisfy that problem, but whether or not that solution works is really purely defined by how well it addresses those needs that you locked onto in the first place. So you got one degree of freedom to pivot around solution, but not one around problem. You're understanding the problem may change, it may get richer, more nuanced, but the process kind of, it keeps you focused in a way that otherwise it can kind of get easy to get lost if you're just kind of running around looking to solve anything.
Right. We have a question in the audience. I'll come to you in just one second. And again, if any of you have questions, please go to either microphone to ask those questions. I'm curious, speaking of evolving and the pivots, the Mailbox officially became available to the public when? That first user got it when?
I think it was in February.
February. Okay, so since February, what has changed? So what are you and your team in that short amount of time to here we are? What's today? May something? Right? June? May 10, I really didn't know. I think that's bad. What has changed in that short amount of time based on your learnings and your measuring and looking at analytics?
What's changed for us as a company?
For Mailbox, just even the product that's in my phone right now, has there been like a lot of changes?
Well, the product itself was really do we do that?
I don't know.
The product itself is really a V1. You know, it's an MVP, a first attempt at trying to solve what's really a very, very big space. And what's cool is now that it's out there, we get a lot of feedback from people about what they want Mailbox to do that it doesn't already. So whereas before we were a handful of people sitting in a room doing small testing with small groups of people to try and get a sense for what the low-hanging fruit was on how to make email better. Now we have just floods of advice and requests and feedback and stuff people love, stuff people hate. And that's really become
What do you pay more attention to, the stuff people love or the stuff people hate?
Well, it's encouraging to hear what people love. That's what keeps you going. What people hate or what they want it kind of helps you prioritize what's next.
Gotcha. Okay, you know what my biggest fear, and we'll come to you right now, my biggest fear when I first started dealing with Mailbox was I thought it was just going to go away forever sometimes. I just was afraid to let go of some of my emails, and I thought I might need that in a little while, knowing that I still have access to it, but there's this fear of letting go of the email. There's no question there. Let's go to a question right out here in the audience.
Gentry, hey, thanks for coming out.
Hey.
I'm a huge fan of Mailbox and a huge fan of Dropbox. And how do they fit together? What's the plan now that you've been acquired, and why? What's the interest there?
Yeah.
The question here is the fit between Dropbox and Mailbox. Maybe you can give a quick backstory because the company, after being around for a short amount of time, was acquired by Dropbox.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think the best way to answer it is to talk about what happened when the launch happened, which was, I think it's Steve Blank who's credited with talking about how a startup is really this temporary business entity that exists as a sort of, it's in search of a product market fit. You're trying to find a scalable business model that can take off. And sometimes that scale is small and sometimes it's really big. In our case, we felt like we found this massive opportunity, which is rethinking mobile email. It's huge. It affects so many people in so many ways. And we felt like we had done a good job of identifying the market, of basically, showing that there was a need here that people resonated with. But that if we were going to actually take that market, we needed to scale quickly. And so one way to do that is to raise more venture money, and we started looking at that as an option. But particularly in Silicon Valley, the process of finding and hiring really great engineering and design talent, it's really hard. It's a very competitive environment. And so for us, there was this fear that even though we might be able to raise a bunch of money, we might not be able to put together a big enough team fast enough to actually go out and address the size of the market we'd actually identified, to build Mailbox for every imaginable mobile device, for every email provider, to add all these other features that felt like they would really enhance the overall experience. And what was cool about Dropbox is it was an opportunity to sort of graft Mailbox onto a larger organization that has a lot of those resources, but that also shares the why. So to go back to this piece about passion, Dropbox is an organization that exists really to take the pain out of work. I mean, that's what drove. Do I have to turn it on or?
I think you're good.
That's what drove the initial product, the syncing thumb drive in the cloud, if you will, and it's in the DNA of that organization. So the overlap that we have really is at the highest level that small, but also that big. It's having a common mission in the world about building tools that take the friction out of work and make working together easier. And in that sense, Mailbox fits in Dropbox's mission, while also allowing, from our perspective, the ability for us to have a much better chance at actually scaling quickly and taking this market.
Great question. Let's get to another one right over here, please. And by the way, your 8-bit drawing is complete.
Awesome.
Designers versus the developers, and how you think that did end up affecting the overall product once you released it.
That's a great question. So,
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So the question was kind of about the makeup of the team and how engineering and design work together. One of the things we've struggled with within our culture is figuring out where to use that word design, because we think of design as this way of solving problems, and it's just as useful when you're trying to architect a piece of a server infrastructure as it is when you're trying to think about how you might communicate the message of a product to people in a way they would resonate with emotionally. And it's, again, just as useful when you're thinking about an interface component. And so for us, we started actually thinking about the organization as having almost two stages: an envisioning team or an envisioning portion, and a realizing team or a realizing portion. And certainly the realizing portion was more engineering heavy, and the envisioning team was put a strong emphasis on prototyping and collaboration and ideating, and that's such a terrible word, but I don't know a better one. But that split of spending a lot of time before you commit to building, like prototyping as quickly as possible and trying lots of ideas and really trying to understand the pros and cons of each one, that rapid prototyping part, that envisioning part, that happened with a core team of 3 designers and a lot of help from other folks in the organization that were either just really great thinkers or could bring a perspective around, say, scalability concerns or cost to build, that kind of thing. And then there's about different times 5, then 8, then 10 folks over on the engineering side who would focus on building the iPhone app, which itself is really a masterful piece of work, and also the server components behind it that actually check your mail from the cloud and reformat everything and are delivering a crazy amount of mail to people's phones every day and scaling those things. So you end up having these 2 teams that work together but are complementary more than they are actually the same.
We're going to come to your question over here in just a second, but a question I have for you is, like, of course, in the entrepreneur circles, we talk so much about failing fast, and you hear the question entrepreneurs all the time that I love to ask: what have you learned from your failures? Now, you're on the upside right now where you have a big success. So what are you learning from the success that you're holding tight? The same way someone's like, I learned this from failure, but you got to be careful during successes like this.
Yeah. Whoa. Hi. The mailbox story it's still unfolding. Like, we've had this wonderful moment where people are very excited about the product, and we're now a part of this larger family. But we have a lot of work left to do in order to actually reach everyone who might be our potential market and make their lives better. And I think the best metaphor in my head is like Tetris. You know, you're playing and the little pieces are falling at a certain level, and the crazy repetitive Russian music's playing in the background, and then you hit some point and you level up, and then stuff starts falling faster. That's kind of what it feels like now. Like, now we're at Dropbox, we're trying to scale the service while also being part of a large organization and trying to take advantage of the pieces that Dropbox brings to bear while not losing focus on the core experience. And in many ways, everything's just gotten much more complicated, but the goals remain the same. So I think for most of us on the team, there's this sense of really being excited that the world has responded well to the product and is excited about it, and it uses it, and it seems to make a big difference in the people's lives who do. But realizing we have all this work ahead of us, and we've just leveled up, and we got to keep running.
Let's go to a question right over here.
Hey, Gentry, my question is kind of like the first question, so you've kind of answered it already, but did you, like, when you got acquired by Dropbox, like, what was kind of the motivation for going that route versus, did you guys see it as like an alternative to raising VC funds and then having to deal with hiring a team and all that, or did you just merge, or did you just like feel like you're naturally there, and when they came into like forget VC, or how did you like go through that thinking? Like,
good question.
Yeah, it was really kind of what I mentioned before, that the thing that was keeping me up at night was there's a difference between identifying a market and taking a market. And I felt like with the video and the launch, we had identified that there was a lot of opportunity to rethink mobile mail. But if we were really going to scale the product and the platforms and the devices that we supported and really try and reach everyone, we needed to grow quickly. And we felt like to be able to join forces with a like-minded organization was the best chance we had at actually doing that.
awesome, thanks.
And we'll come to you in just one moment. When you join a large organization like that, historically, you can look back and you can see sometimes the founders don't always stay with the company after an acquisition. So on your end, were a lot of discussions going in before you're allowed to this, or is there the standard, okay, you're obligated to stay at least 1 year before you can bounce, or how do you make sure you can work underneath this bigger umbrella?
I think those are really serious issues. I mean, if you find yourself in a situation where you've got a potential exit for a startup, but it comes with some expectation that you're going to be sticking around and helping out, either to continue the product or to join and help out on other products or services in the company that you go to. It's just a new kind of marriage. It's a new kind of relationship or partnership, and in that sense, for us, we spent a lot of time thinking about if this was a place where we wanted to invest our time and energy. And it's funny, I brought up Dropbox prior to all of this in Des Moines as one of the best examples that I could think of a startup that focused on building great products that directly served users' needs. So it's kind of sort of funny in hindsight the way this has all played out. I really do have a lot of admiration for the organization. I think the whys are very aligned, and it feels to me like a place where there's a lot of opportunity to help put a dent in the universe. So,
Let's take a couple more questions. We're running out of time already. This has been great. Let's go right over here, please.
I have a question about your design thinking around the solution. And as I saw the video, I thought of Merlin Mann's Inbox Zero, which I don't know if influenced it, but the whole practice of getting your inbox down to zero and thinking of the operations of email. So as you think about the product today and where it's going, do you look at expert research into your design? Is it self-design, thinking of how your team uses it? Or is it really focused around the user and observing them? And how do you balance those three viewpoints to shape the product?
Yeah, great. I mean, the product design process is, I think, at its best, a mix of all of those things. You spend a lot of time looking at what everyone else is doing, from other products and tools to other experts and thinkers. Merlin Mann's a great example. I think David Allen with Getting Things Done is another really good one that had a lot of effect on us. You look a lot at the underlying psychology and what actually motivates people and what drives them. There's a lot of challenges around behavior change that we had to pay attention to. There's some addictive properties of email that we paid a lot of attention to and found out ways to try and lean into without exploiting, I guess. And then you work a lot with individuals and try and, there's a series of prototyping and idea producing techniques that human-centered design processes kind of train you in that are really about helping find new ways to attack old problems. And I think it's a mix of the very best of what other people are doing with a process that helps you come up with some ideas of your own, and you try and find a synthesis of those things that really produces something cohesive that you can stand behind.
I was just going to ask quick about Orchestra and how you decided it was a failure, because I'm guessing you had lots of downloads, and how did you just decide we didn't solve the problem and we need to try again? And maybe what would have been a failure for this app? Would you have pulled the plug if it wouldn't have reached 1,000 or 100,000 or whatever that number was? How do you decide if you solved it?
Yeah, I don't know that we ever decided that Orchestra itself was a failure in the sense that we wanted to abandon it. Mailbox began as the version 2 of Orchestra. So we were looking at how people were using Orchestra and paying attention to what was working and what wasn't. And there was a lot of enjoyment of the simplicity pieces of it, the ease of collaboration, the way that mobile invited more lightweight interactions. But we saw that the concept of a to-do list was kind of a broken product, that it was very rewarding to use when you first got into it. When you basically went from a blank slate and got everything out of your head and piled it into this list, you felt great. But nobody finishes everything on their to-do list, and over time, so much of that stuff starts staring back at you and nagging at you that you start to get this sort of sick feeling in your stomach when you go back into the app. And as an app designer, that's like the worst thing that you want someone to associate with going in and using an app regularly. So we were just actually trying to figure out how to solve that problem, to figure out how to make some organizational tool that was better than a to-do list in that way. And as we were iterating on that, we realized that we had made some more fundamental errors, and the product that we were working on evolved more and more to where we stopped thinking of it as V2 of Orchestra and started thinking of it as a new product, and eventually started thinking of it as a mobile email client, although that itself took more time too. So it was, while it looks like from the outside that we kind of went here, then backed up and said, okay, let's go here, it was actually this meandering, wandering, I mean, I could bring you through thousands of mocks in between that where you could see tiny pieces of Orchestra change and change and change until it eventually turned into Mailbox. So it's death by 1,000 cuts. We looked at what was working and what wasn't, and kept iterating on an attempt to improve that, and that's what eventually led us to this place where the same product actually looked and sounded and in every way felt very different than the one that had begun as.
I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I have one last question for you, that being, of course, you came to Think Iowa, Big Des Moines, and now you're here with so many new updates. If we happen to see you at the Silicon Prairie Awards, or if we happen to see you at Big Des Moines next year, what's the outlook for the future? What are you looking to have happen?
Well, I think that we want to go take this market. We want to basically build the best email experiences in the world for as many people as we can. So I think that's really what our focus is going to be on for the foreseeable future. Appreciate you guys having us.
Give it up for
Thanks
Gentry
so much.
Underwood.